Welcome to Raising Eight, the podcast that proves a full house is more than just a TV show. Meet the dad who's raised 8 kids and 2 grandkids under one roof and has the scars and dad jokes to show for it. Grab a cup of coffee, pull up a chair, and let's talk family, big family.
Good morning, podcast listeners. This is Ed Franklin with the Ed Franklin No Limits podcast. This is Raising Eight, episode 10, stories of a full house from a father's perspective. And I have a great guest today, Chris Linder. We're going to talk about education, which sounds boring, but I got news for you. By the time this podcast's over, we're going to give you some food for thought. And it's another one of those parenting things you don't really plan for, but you have to do. And of course, I'm always during the month of October, I always acknowledge breast cancer awareness. I had to go to the doctor this week just for some checkup stuff, and it makes you feel real good when you come home and everything's fine. And so if you women need to get checked, and I got news for you, men, you can get breast cancer too. I have a friend that her husband had breast cancer. So I'm glad to see the NFL and other sports that acknowledge it, and we're doing the same thing. So Chris, thanks for being on. We had a great conversation a week or two ago about a plethora of things, and we're going to try to keep this at a normal podcast length, but if it goes over, we'll split it up in 2 pieces. We'll do whatever we have to do to get the word out. So welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Ed.
So Chris wrote a book called Homeschool Remix, and I was telling everybody that I've been getting, since I started this Raising Eight podcast, I've been getting clinical psychologists, educators, people. I have a guy about AI coming on this week, and all these different people, and it's really, first of all, the podcast is blowing up compared to where I was at. I probably had over 110,000 views of my clips over the last 90 days, which is 10 times what I had before. So it's going great. And so, Chris, I'll give you an opportunity to tell us a little bit about your background. I know you're a former educator and something that we didn't really talk about, but you're a former radio host, right?
Yes, actually, my high school had a radio station, so I kind of fell into radio broadcasting
Right.
because uh, I moved from Wisconsin to Tennessee in high school, and at my high school, I was the only one there without any kind of Southern accent.
Right.
So if there's one thing I could do is speak. So
Right.
I did well in that class and went on to do radio for almost 2 decades.
So it's funny, we did in middle school, I had a little radio show with a buddy of mine, and they set us up and down like during lunch we would play music, and it was, we get stupid, and we were actually in the local paper about that. I remember it was a fun thing. Maybe that's where my thing started here with getting on and speaking. But you were also a teacher at one point,
Yes.
and
Um,
your wife was a teacher also.
yes. Yes. She was a much better teacher than I was.
They're always better than us, buddy.
I kind of like most things, I kind of fell into teaching. I was a substitute teacher while I was a radio announcer, and I hopped around from city to city as one does. I moved from Madison, Wisconsin to Houston, Texas,
Okay.
and then to Atlanta, Georgia. That's where I met my wife. I kind of got off the radio train then and went into teaching full time. And I had actually taught a little bit before. I'll start at the beginning. I'll rewind and go way back.
Yep, go ahead.
When I was a kid, I went to a small charter school for elementary school where we worked on individual booklets in little cubicles. We worked at our own pace. The booklets were called paces. And I never saw the inside of a traditional classroom until middle school and high school.
Okay.
So that kind of shaped my views on education, my way of looking at school. It was an independent type thing. When I went to middle school and high school, I had really good teachers who were able to teach me critical thinking, teach me creative writing, ways of expressing myself through the written word.
Right.
Um, so I really like glommed onto that, and then, like I said, I fell into radio and did that for a while. I was on the air in Knoxville, Tennessee, and I tell this story. I got really bored one Sunday afternoon, and I realized I had this wanderlust in my system, and I thought to myself, what's the furthest away I can go and still make some money, but get this, this need to explore out of my system. So I got a book called Work Your Way Around the World. And it said you could, pick fruit in South America, you could work on a farm in Europe, you could teach English in Japan and South Korea. And I was like, that's it. I can sit around and talk and get paid for it.
Right.
So I'll do that. I'm not really good at farm work, but I'll go and teach English. So I taught English in South Korea at a little language institution called a Hagwon. Um, and it's kind of like extra school.
Okay.
Kids learning English, um, taking classes before their regular classes or late at night, up into the night, um, just taking English classes so they could, get good careers, but also be able to understand the idioms and slang that they're seeing in American movies.
Oh, right.
Um,
Yeah. Had to kind of be their extracurricular stuff as those American movies. Yeah.
yeah.
So go
So,
ahead.
and that kind of shaped my way of looking at education as well. There's no reason why education has to be boring. There's no reason why you have to feel trapped. Uh, as long as you're learning something that's useful. And I had the opportunity to teach a lot of young people that were motivated by the need to learn English. When I came back to the States, I got back into radio broadcasting and did that for a few more years. And like I said, I moved to Atlanta, met my wife. She was a teacher. I became a teacher. I taught high school English for a couple of years and realized I was a much better teacher than I was a babysitter. And I don't know if you know anything about high school sophomores, but I mean,
Well, I mean, I have 8 kids and 20 grandkids, so I know a few, I know a few things. Well, and so that leads me to something, and you said something that, so you have children and we have kids and they're so cute and they're cuddly and all this, and then they're going to go to school and we're all excited about them starting school. And then we start to learn how our kids learn. And then
yes,
we start to learn about school districts. And we start to learn a lot. We started getting a lot of information we don't want to see. We just want to send our kids to school and have them come home educated, right?
exactly.
But with us, we had 8 kids and they all learned different. We had, so I'm a baby boomer. They taught pretty much one way, and you either learned or you didn't learn, right?
Right.
And I didn't like school, so I graduated early, and there was that opportunity existed, and I was able to do that. Now, I feel like I'm a smart person, but I better off learning hands-on, right?
Sure.
Like if I sit in a classroom and learn about a fan, for instance, like an exhaust fan when I was in that business, versus going into the factory and seeing how they're put together, and I go, oh, I get that now. I understand it now. So, and then we have, in addition to all those learning issues with our kids, we have political issues that we're not going to go down that road, but you know I'm right when you say there's certain school districts that have different political views or different states, like California has different political views than, Texas. And they're giving that to our children too. And we're trying to say, hey, just stop. Let's just educate. But it's hard to get that mix out of there. So I think that almost causes a learning disability at some point because the kid now they're confused, right? They're saying, well, I'm getting this at home and I get this here, and this is what they want me to learn. So you must have had that, especially in high school, when these kids start getting their own ideas, which they should,
Hmm.
but you're probably going, what the hell just happened, right? Kind of thing. Is that true?
Um, well, not so much. I think because the way that in our particular case, the way we raised our kids was uh we're very socially and politically forward.
Okay.
So I think they couldn't help but get a heaping helping of our views. So by the time they got into high school, they pretty much knew where we stood, and they were able to, like, I really am a big proponent of teaching critical thinking. They were able to go into school um and think for themselves despite um whatever kind of influences that they were getting from teachers or administration.
Yeah,
So
and I think that our kids knew where we stood too, by the time they got to high school, definitely by the time they got to high school. But I can tell you as I get older, my mind has definitely opened up, right? I'm not so this got to be this way all the time. Now, I wouldn't say that I'm either direction, the right or the left. I kind of like common sense answers, right?
sure.
This person, I don't care who they are, made a good decision and it's in the best interest of society, and that's fine with me. I might not have voted for that person, but if they're making good decisions like that, I'm on board with that. It's kind of almost I don't know, what do they call that? Like not a Republican or a Democrat, but maybe just a free thinker or whatever you want to call it.
Independent.
Independence. That's the word I was looking
Sure.
for. So as we were, as our kids were getting educated, some of them had interest, some of them did not. Now, when I grew up, there was no push or requirement to go to college, right? We kind of just went and worked. We didn't have any professionals in our family, doctors, lawyers, or anything like that I knew of. So we just the whole idea was to get out of high school, go to work as soon as you could, and work as hard as you can and move up in that company, right? And
Yeah.
learn on the job. You're learning as you're going. Now, it's almost required you have some kind of education, a degree or something. And whether that degree means anything is still, you know, it's still out there as a guess for either job. But so you wrote a book called Homeschool Premix or Remix, excuse me, Homeschool Remix, and I'll put Chris's website in the description of this podcast. And we had talked about this, and you can explain it way better than me. I know that this is kind of a tool to help parents and kids assimilate that information they're getting from school.
Sure.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about that book.
Well, like I said, I'm a big proponent of critical thinking. I think it's really important for students to not just learn the facts and figures of whatever subject they're getting in school, but also learn how to synthesize it, how to process it, how to draw conclusions, make predictions, and think a little bit deeper on what they're learning. Um, there's it's my standpoint that the educational system hasn't changed substantially in the last
I
century.
agree. I
It's
agree.
been, basically stuck for like 100 years.
And a few things have changed, by the way, in the last 100 years. Just a couple.
Yeah, just a couple. But the mission of the school system is still the same: to turn out moderately educated, um, non-critical thinking laborers to fill the labor force, to fill the workforce, to
Right.
serve as cheap labor. That's why most kids, when they graduate 12th grade, they're still reading at a fifth grade level, sixth grade level, if they're lucky. They're not trained in financial literacy. They don't know how to balance a checkbook. They're not critical thinkers. A lot of them have no idea of any cultural history, and that's actually being even more rolled back than it has been
Right.
in recent years. Um, and they're just at a loss, and that's affecting black and brown kids even more than mainstream youth. It's my view that the marginalized communities are the ones who are suffering a lot from that. So I came up with this framework and I wrote this book, Homeschool Remix, initially not aiming at marginalized communities, but it just kind of worked out that way that what I was finding was that they were more likely to be affected um, by the stagnation in the educational system, and they were less likely to gravitate towards homeschooling. And there's a couple of reasons for that, but number one is they they didn't have the time and didn't have the money and didn't have the energy to devote to full-time homeschooling.
Well, and also, do you think that their parents, going back a generation, weren't taught those things either, so they didn't have the resources in their mind? You know what I'm saying?
Correct. Yes, a lot of parents, even if they do uh, make the calculus that they want to get in homeschooling, they think that they're not qualified to teach,
Hmm.
because again, they maybe they don't have the training of a teacher, and teaching is hard. I think we all discovered after COVID that teaching and teachers, this is a real profession that
That
takes a
was,
lot out of you, and that actually,
that was a
there's
hard
a
lesson.
science to
COVID was
it.
a hard lesson because we had two kids at home, and it was oh shit, we had considered homeschooling years ago, and my wife and I both looked at each other and said, "Nope, no, we're not
Yeah,
gonna. This is not our gig." I have
and
a lot of respect for teachers.
I wanted to homeschool when our kids were young, but
Yeah,
my wife, the teacher, was like, "No,
I have a
it's
lot of
harder than you think."
I have a lot of respect for most teachers.
Yes,
Now, there's always those teachers that kind of slip through the cracks, right? We've all had those as parents looking at, and we've had to teach our kids to manage those teachers, right? Whichever way we could. And I've had some falling out with principals and things about some teachers, but and for the most part, we were really fortunate to have, and since my wife and I went through the same system, and we're living in the community for so many years, we knew a lot of the teachers too, personally. So we got really fortunate.
I hear you. I'm
Now,
having trouble with my camera. That's why it's
that's all right.
floating.
Our school district is right now is a financial train wreck, right? So we had this really good school district that was touted as one of the best in California and the best in the United States, and it has spiraled out of control because of elected school board members and things like that. And I'm not pointing anybody out. I'm just saying this is the reality, and they've made some bad financial decisions, and now we're not doing so good. And which is sad because the kids still are on the hook, right? That we still need to make sure we're educating the kids correctly. The way they disperse funds in San Diego County, we're on the lower end of getting funds dispersed to us too, which I don't care if anyone doesn't like that. It's the truth, right? You have to have money to educate kids.
Right.
Um,
Exactly.
for whatever resources, whether it's mechanical or educational, whatever it is, so that we need resources. So anyway, I kind of got you off track on your book. So tell us, tell me what the book can help with. Let's do it that way.
Sure. So, basically, parents are realizing that their kids aren't getting everything they need to get in school. Things like financial literacy, things like critical media literacy.
Right.
So what I did was I pulled out about a dozen, maybe like 15 or 16 different subjects that that maybe either kids weren't getting enough of in school, or they could be things like fine arts that kids may want, some specific and more, more in-depth study in, because of whatever their interests might be. And I just made a framework for parents to be able to say, I don't have to homeschool full time, but there's nothing preventing me from giving a couple of hours of instruction a week, a couple of extra lessons, and still leaving my kid in school, enrolled
Right.
in school, either part time or full time, and just kind of supplementing that with home lessons. And that's what hybrid homeschooling is. And that's what the homeschool remix framework is all about.
So here, this couple things that drive me a little nuts in school is they have taken the fine arts. Like most of my kids only had 1 year of music. Um, there they have taken a lot of the, and I know statistically, I've read about this that kids that are musical or artistic and things that are better students generally, but they're pulling that step out, which also, when you're talking about an artist compared to a lawyer, let's say, right? An artist has this very open mind generally, right?
Right.
They're much more creative. An attorney has rules to follow, right? And I'm not insulting attorneys or artists. I'm just saying it's a different way of thinking. It's like a salesperson versus an engineer, right? And I'm in
Exactly.
sales, and when I go to talk to engineer, man, it's a whole different language just sometimes. So they've taken that out. They've taken out physical education a lot of times, and I think I'm going to get a guest on soon that wrote. He's written like 10 books or co-authored like 10 books, and one of the things he talks about is how important it is for kids to be in a team atmosphere. And I would take that even further, where my wife was involved doing flags with the band. And those kind of organizations are good for kids. They're good to, it teaches them how to be coachable, teachable, and it could be anything. It could be sports or anything. But I told you when we were talking before this podcast, you can go to any park in the city I live in on a Saturday, and there's no parking within a mile of the place because every parent these days thinks their kid's going to be a professional athlete, right? And they're not. When we grew up, you might have an athlete that would stand out, and there wasn't, I don't even think the training was available for that standout athlete. Now you can get a batting coach for your 2-year-old, and they're a dime a dozen, right? Because everybody thinks, oh, I'm just going to teach my kid, then he can make all this money, won't have to worry about it. Well, we know statistically that's lunacy. But
Everybody wants to be Richard Williams and raise Venus and Serena. They think if they
exactly.
could, well, if I get them tennis lessons or I get them golf lessons, we set for life.
On the flip side of that, how many people are spending time with their kids educationally? And that's where your book comes in, where here's a framework, a groundwork. You've laid out some groundwork for parents to go, hey, and I took a class in high school called Coping with Crisis, and we planned a funeral, and we did a bunch of other stuff, which was weird as hell, right? When I was in high, but I kind of understood the process when I had to do it.
Right.
Remembering what happened. And my parents were good about teaching us how to write a check and how to balance. We kind of learned all that at home. But your book is kind of like, to me, is a really good for the average person out there or above average that wants their kids to listen. Every kid, as far as I'm concerned, every person I've ever met is super intelligent. You just have to you got to draw them out, right? And
Right.
figure out how they learn and things like that. They may make stupid decisions, but it's not out of lack of intelligence. It's generally out of lack of information. And this book allows a parent to get a little bit more involved in their education.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really feel like parents are able to really pinpoint exactly how their child learns best. A
Of
parent is
course.
their child's first and most natural teacher. They're able to, just like your kids are able to push your buttons, they know what to say to piss you off.
Not my kids.
As a parent, you know what to do and say to get your child to do what it obviously doesn't work all the time, but
Sure.
you know how to get them in line better than the teacher who's dealing with 25 different personalities on an hourly basis in a school. You know better than they know how to deal with your kid.
But I
And
kind of go back to the thing where I don't think parents, I tell you, after doing this podcast and talking to all these different guests I have, I swear to God, you should have to have a license to have a kid because there's so many factors to raising a child from, discipline, education, all these things I've been talking about. trauma, all these things that kids go through and we go through too as parents. And then on top of that, they're all different, right? They all have different DNA. They all respond to things differently. I have 8 kids. They're all different. I spoke to a doctor, this Kate Lund, a while back. She's like a parent coach and performance coach, and she has twins. She goes, they're opposite, and you wouldn't think that, right? You generally twins kind of do some things. She goes, no, they're completely opposite people, which is kind of a trip to hear that from twins.
No, but I mean that happens.
Yeah.
Um, my kids aren't twins, but they're almost like night and day when it comes to certain things.
Oh, 100% with all
Mhm.
my kids. And now as adults, the same thing. And they're making decisions, and I can see maybe where they had some lack where the decisions they're making, some of them are better at it than others. And some of them are motivated, some of them aren't. There's some of them are industrious, some of them are not. It's just a crapshoot, and you don't know. And as a parent, you just got to kind of be like Jello. You just got to kind of form to each kid and figure out what it is. My mom used to say, if I said, well, why does he get to do that and I don't? And she'd say, because you're not the same person, because you're different. You're younger, you're a lot of things. And my brother was 7.5 years older than me. So he was almost another generation, when you start, because he
Yeah.
went through, he could have gotten, he could have had to go to Vietnam. And I had no chance for me to go. The war ended, so I didn't even have to mess with that. But those are the things my parents were dealing with.
Yeah.
But this book, and like I said, I looked at the statistics this week, and it's about 7 or 8% of the kids in the nation are homeschooled. And I told you my wife works for a homeschool. She works for a charter school. So I know a little bit about it on the administrative side of how it works.
Right.
And my daughter-in-law homeschools 6 kids,
Wow.
all her children. But she was homeschooled and she's good at it. Like she knows exactly, she's very organized. She knows, and her kids are doing phenomenal for their age. So my
That's half the battle.
grandkids,
Being organized, staying organized
yeah,
as a parent is half the probably more than half the battle right
yeah.
there.
I just got to a point where I really couldn't stand a 10-year-old, right? I loved my kids. I loved being their dad, but
Sure.
having to be intellectual with them would, shit, some of the guys I was working with that were 40 acted like 10-year-olds. So I was kind of tired. By the time I got home from work, I was like,
Yeah.
I'm like, I can't take anymore. But I'm kidding. But
I mean,
actually,
the
I'm
way
not
you
kidding.
relate as a parent, the way you relate to your kids at age 10 is different from the way you relate at age 14.
100%.
They're changing, and as parents, we tend to stay the same, but
Well, I
we need
told
to
you
realize that they're changing.
I had listened to that doctor on Mel Robbins' show, and he said that no child grows up in the same household because so many every month something's changing. It could be economics, it could be just 100 different things. I mean, and they're not getting the same. I mean, I got news for you. I was way less strict with my old younger kids than I was my older ones
Yeah,
because I started seeing that a lot of the stuff that I thought was a big deal was not a big deal. It was nothing in the whole scheme of things.
yeah, yeah.
And and I try to tell my kids that because they'll get wound up over something their child did. And I said, in the whole scheme of things, this doesn't mean shit. In 5 years, this will mean zero, about what you, and that's that whole thing with my mom would say, she heard from a priest to tell your kids no as little as possible. And if you do, give them a good reason because sometimes there's just absolutely no reason why they shouldn't be able to go do something, you know,
Right.
as long
Yes.
as they're safe. And you can't control that. Once they're once they leave, they can't control their safety. You'd have to hope they have a good head on their shoulders.
My wife and I used to have a shorthand uh based on a Cat Williams joke where he, said, sometimes parents beat their kids for the the most minor of things, like, kid picked up Skittles in a grocery store, and
Right.
parent knocks it up. Kids are supposed to like Skittles. So that was our shorthand, Skittles. Whenever our kids would do something that, we just had to step back and go, you know what?
Right.
It's not that serious. And we were just like Skittles.
And it's those genius marketers that put the stuff right,
right at
right in the
child's
reach of a
reach.
child, right, while they're in their basket or whatever.
Yeah.
And yeah, and we're supposed to expect the kids to, and our kids did have discipline about it, but I tell you, they not the first couple times. I'd have to say no, you can't have those. I know they put them there for you to grab, but no, we're not getting those today.
Right.
And those are those lessons you learn. But
Sure.
education is definitely because we've had kids from almost failing to, scholars. It just depended on that kid's motivation, their view of how they viewed education, and it goes back to how they learned. And if they were learning differently than their brother or sister in the same atmosphere, they're going to get a different result.
That's what that's the whole point of Homeschool Remix. It's not about teaching the facts and figures. I mean, they're either going to learn that or they're not. And I know this is weird coming from a person who's supposed to be a teacher, but most of what you learn in high school, it really doesn't matter. But the most important lesson that a parent can teach their child and what they're not getting in school is how to learn.
Dude,
They
you
need
just
to
said the
know
exact
how
same
to
thing.
learn.
I've said that a million times. I say it all the time. And I said all the time, this was my thing. I said, you need to learn how, and I've told my kids this, you need to learn how to learn, how the best way. And then you can articulate that to whoever's trying to teach you something, right? For me, dude, take me into the factory. I'll learn this stuff. Or give me what you're asking me to do and let me try to figure it out because that's the way I'm going to learn the best. If you tell me, sometimes I'm not going to assimilate that information very good. But I didn't mean to interrupt, but
No,
because
that's
when
it's
my wife
exactly right.
hears this podcast, she's going to go, "Oh my God, Ed says that all the time," because I do all the time. You got to learn how to learn.
Yeah, and you have to model that for your kids.
Hmm.
So if you're sitting down, you're trying to tackle algebra together, and speaking from personal experience, I am not a math person, but when my youngest was having trouble with algebra, I had to, you know, break out a curriculum that could teach them algebra because I wasn't, especially that algebra 2, it was like Greek to me. It was like worse
Yeah,
than Greek because maybe I could have decode Greek, but this was like ridiculously hard. But if you model that for your kids and say, you know what, I don't know this particular subject, but I'm going to research how to teach it to you, and I'm going to learn it so that you can learn it. If you teach them that learning doesn't stop when they get that diploma,
right.
learning is a lifelong thing. If you model that for your kids, they'll be set.
Well, and I at times I read a lot, right? Or I listen to books a lot too. I don't have a problem getting when I'm driving because I used to drive a lot for sales. I would listen to books.
Sure.
And I had this one funny thing happen. Audible was going to stop. I was paying for Audible, and I'm like, I'm tired of paying for this. And they said, well, before you go, use your 16 credits. So I had to get 16 books, and they were all
That's how
business.
they get you.
I know that's how they get me. No, 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 but it didn't cost anything because I had already paid for them, right? From my
Oh yeah,
monthly thing.
yeah. But I mean, that's how they keep you. That's how they keep me
Yeah.
anyway.
So I
Because
got
I'm
all
like,
those
oh
books, and then I could shut the monthly thing off and still listen to them on my phone. And
yeah.
I read this in a book that I can tell you where you'll be in 2 years if you tell me who you're hanging out with and what you're reading. And I don't think kids, and I know my kids don't read enough. They need to read more. They need to get more information in their head. I'm a sponge. I'm always reading something. I just bought a book on AI. I have another book that I'm reading or something else. So I'm always trying to absorb that information. And I had a complete point with that. But um, and some of my
No,
kids, a lot of my
you're a lot like me. Like you need this constant stream
constant stream.
of input, and your brain does the hard work of drawing out what's important and making connections and helping that along, but you kind of thrive on this input. I used to listen to there's a when I was in Wisconsin, I grew up on a radio station, WGN in Chicago, and it was like
Mhm.
all talk, and other kids my age were obviously into, it was the 80s, they were into music,
Mhm.
and I was like, I would listen to oldies, I would listen to the Beatles maybe, but nine times out of 10, if I'm listening to the radio, it's talk radio.
That's what I
And
did.
I'm like, how can you listen to that? How can, and it wasn't like talk radios now where it's all political and it's all, one side or the other, but it was, just interesting thing, just people talking about interesting
Yeah.
things. I need that.
I know. So I traveled the 11 Western states for a few years, and that I got tired of music, right? So I would listen to talk radio all the time. And funny enough, as I would cross over like a county line, I would lose that station and get another one. And some of it was syndicated,
Sure.
and that. But I want to go down a road, and I don't want to take too much time with this because if my listeners, I, so you were talking about the black and brown communities, right? And I
Hmm.
hope you don't think I said that I take it as an insult. Do you find that, did you have that crossover in Atlanta? Did you have, like, so in Poway, where I grew up, it's a little suburb of San Diego County. There was the area I lived in, and then there was this really wealthy area. So the wealthy, like the kids would drive Corvettes to school, dude, like brand new Corvettes.
Hmm.
And we would drive, my first car was a 67 Volkswagen that I painted primer with a spray can. So you get the, right? So they had this money, and then so it was kind of both sides of the tracks went to the same school. Did you have that when you were teaching?
um
Or was it more economical, not economical? Was it more even with the students you had?
in the area I taught in, it was much more even.
Pretty even, okay.
um uh and I've been black all my life, so it's I've
Really?
my experiences have run the
That's a
gamut
great
from
joke.
being the one black kid in all white school, um to being, maybe just a few of us, to being in a really ritzy private school, where again I wasn't economically on the same level as all the other kids with,
Right.
you know, but and then being the one black person in an entire city in Korea,
Oh, right. Yeah. I didn't even think
and
of that.
maybe being the only black person that they've seen. But there is a lot of both social and economic disparity, um, among marginalized communities, but that's not
So,
so germane to, like, the experiences are important, but that doesn't change the way that a particular family needs to approach education for their
so
kids,
here's
for
my
their
point. So
situation.
last week I had lunch with a guy that I haven't seen in 51 years. Okay. We were friends in elementary school. And we grew up in this very diverse area, right? Black, Mexican. It's pretty much black, Mexican, and white. Didn't run a lot of Asians back then because it was the 70s, right? And they hadn't, except for somebody who might have married a girl from Vietnam, there was really no. So I moved to this area, and I don't even know if there was a black person in our entire school. I'm like, what the hell happened here? I mean, this is so lily white, right where I moved. And in high school, maybe three or four black people, but I knew a lot of black people that I from San Diego, where I grew up.
Sure.
And all we cared about is if you could play basketball. My point to that is, are they getting a different social message, right? People of color versus where when I moved to Poway, are they getting a different, and that could be politically or anything else, but I don't want to really go down that big road. I want your opinion. If you got if you or a community gets a different message about education and things like that.
I'm not sure that they
Because the
do.
intellect is there, no matter your skin color does not equal your intellect, right? We know
Do
that.
you mean as far as like the importance of education?
I just think
Or
that I feel like when you're in a community that maybe is more racial, right? Not racial, that wasn't the right word. More diverse,
less
right?
less diverse or more diverse?
More diverse. Like when you have every color under the sun, like when I grew up, it's more, I feel like we got more of a non-professional message that you just go to work and work your ass off and move up. Whereas when I moved to Poway, It was like, oh, you gotta, we got doctors, lawyers. I knew a kid that was his dad was an architect when I was a little kid, and I'm like, fuck is an architect, right? So I looked it up and found out that's the coolest job ever. But obviously, you need a degree to be an architect. You just don't start drawing buildings. So I feel like we got more of a working class message from politically and from the school district and things like that.
I think I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
I think that it's really different here in Atlanta. Um, and in some places in the country it's different. But for the most part, I think people in marginalized communities are looked at like you're supposed to fit in this class. And maybe if you try really hard, you'll get maybe a step above.
Hmm.
Um,
That's damning to society to me.
yes, yes,
That's a
it very much
horrible,
is.
yeah. And that's where racism comes in and all this stuff. And see, in California, education is paramount to success here, right? You're not getting a job at Starbucks usually unless you got a degree. And the problem is they've put out all this money for degrees and they've made it this is the litmus test. You have to have this, which we know that's not true. Now, we don't have enough plumbers, carpenters, we don't have all these other trades, and that's, I think this is nationwide, but California is even worse. I just I hate that we're giving the message to kids, no matter what color they are, that because you're this color or whatever, you have to fit into this hole. That just pisses me
Well,
off because it's just not the way it should be.
I think one of the things that really has an effect on that is representation. And I think when kids are in school and they're looking in their textbooks, if they're not seeing people that look like them, they don't see that as a possibility. So
See,
if
you
you're
brought
not,
that up last time, and that is a thousand
yeah,
percent true. And I didn't mean to interrupt you. Keep going on that thought because that's you brought that up.
no, if you don't study or learn about Black scientists, Black doctors, Black lawyers, then you don't see that as a possibility for yourself, unless
1,000%.
maybe you're lucky enough to have an uncle who's a psychologist or something, or you know somebody in your family who's a lawyer. Um, if you don't see that as a possibility, then you think the best that you can do is either play pro ball or get a good job
Yeah.
after you graduate high school and hold on to that job for 40 years,
Which the,
you
the
know.
playing sports
And
is a gazillion to one. I mean, that's not
I
even.
mean, neither of
I know
those
what you're
things
saying. I know
are
what you're saying.
possible now. You know, the playing sports was never a possibility, but now even holding onto a job for, decades, that's not even in the realm of possibility,
Well, that's yeah, for anybody. We just
you
don't have
know?
those jobs
So
around
so it's
anymore.
just you're faced with very unrealistic possibilities
Mhm.
unless that's shown to you. And that's one of the things that using the framework does, because as a parent you're encouraged to teach your kid whatever history is relevant to your family. Black history if you're Black, Mexican or Chicano history, indigenous people's histories. Those are things that they're not getting in traditional school. Even,
Yeah,
I mean, even when I was in school, you get in the month of February, which is Black History Month, you get a little bit of, we study Rosa Parks, talk about Martin Luther King, and
that's
and
the
that's it. And that's what most kids
that's the
get.
dumbest.
That's Black history for the rest
Yeah,
of their lives.
that is such a. I think that's just degrading to have
To
a
have a
Black
month
History
set
Month.
aside for, okay,
I
and
know it's just the
this month
most
we're
dumb
going to
thing,
study your history.
right?
And
It's just the dumbest thing in the world. But here, so parents, since this is a podcast about parenting, these are things that are on you, right? If you,
exactly.
you know,
It's your responsibility as a parent to find the things that
point
they're
those
not
things
learning in
out.
school
Yeah.
and somehow present it to them, put it in front of them, let them make their own, you know, decisions and choices, but at least expose them to it.
And because we're on the
Expose them to the
border,
possibilities.
we're on the Mexican border here, we do get more influx of that Hispanic history, which I said Hispanic to a person once that worked for me. And she goes, I'm a Mexican. Don't, that's a white word. Don't give me that crap. And I said, that's what I thought too. I just didn't want to, I don't know what to say anybody, call anybody anymore. But so we have a lot of Mexican culture, obviously, here. And because of, we're a military town, we have a lot of people that just, it's a melting pot, right? Because once you move to San Diego, just a warning, you're not going to leave. Because of the weather and everything, you start going, whoa, this is like you can surf in the morning and snow ski in the afternoon on certain times of the year. So it's very
I actually
attractive.
my best friend was his wife at the time was stationed in Miramar.
Yeah, so
Um,
we're right down the street from Miramar.
yeah,
In
so
fact, I'm surprised I haven't heard any planes coming over right now because they come over all day. Yeah.
I stayed there for a couple of months right before I went off to South Korea. So
Oh, nice.
I'm familiar. And it was like I was there for 2 months, and maybe one of those days it got a little cloudy,
I
but it
know.
was like, how can you stand this perfect weather
Well, it's 65
day after
today,
day after day?
and I have a sweatshirt on because it's 65. And
That's
we're going to
crazy.
get a couple drops of rain today, and then tomorrow it's supposed to be 80, like for 2 weeks. So anyway, well,
Wow.
Chris, I think dude, I could talk to you forever. I get guests where I could just like you and I could hang out like all day and talk about, and I'd go, oh shit, what about this? And then you'd say something. So, but we can't do that because the podcast will go too long. I may or may not break this up into two pieces because we're almost 50 minutes in. But um, listen, you're a super intelligent guy. I love your attitude about a lot of things, and you've done a lot of cool stuff, right? I don't know if I would have went to South Korea and taught English, but that's you got more guts than me. But um, I think that you're on. I think this is a good thing you're doing with this homeschool remix, and you're going to have an app. Are you developing an app for this too?
We're developing an app for the mixtape. And the mixtape is basically a curated collection of lessons for teens
Okay,
to teach critical thinking spread out across 8 different subjects. So 16
nice.
lessons and 4 projects every month delivered um, via app or via online, because I really believe in meeting kids where they are. And a
Sure.
lot of kids are
Oh,
spending a
you're
lot of time
100% right.
online,
And that's a
so
subscription-based thing ultimately when you get the app or
yes,
turn it in Berlin.
it'll
Okay,
be available through. We have a community that we're starting called the SEAT Squad. SEAT stands for Support, Educate, Adapt, and Thrive.
okay,
And we put it together because parents are really, they're out there on their own in a lot of cases. And, even when you do decide to do hybrid homeschooling or full-time homeschooling, you go into it with the best laid plans, but after a month, you're like, oh, I can't do this. This is crazy.
I
There's
know.
a lot of burnout. So you need this kind of, support from other people who are doing the same thing. So we're just trying to put together, you know, communities, kind of people helping people and trading lessons and, not spending all their money on curriculum, and just kind of seeing that there is a third way out there of dealing with the educational system.
I think the disservice that my parents did to us, looking back, nothing, no offense to them, and the disservice the 70s did to us, right, is that they didn't put enough emphasis on two things: how to learn, what we talked about, and how much better off you are with more information. Right. So anybody I've ever
Yes.
met can teach me something. I don't care if it's a homeless person, a doctor, and I could teach them something. It's funny if when I don't get a job and they ask me a question, I can say, well, do you know how to do this? And they say, well, no. And I say, well, see, I do because I've learned that and I can learn more. It's not, you're not going to find anybody that knows everything, but you're going to find every person you meet, you're going to learn something that you don't have any idea. And it could be playing the fucking xylophone. I don't know, whatever it is. Doesn't matter. It's just they know something you don't know and they learned it their own way or whatever. It's like kind of like watching a savant play the piano, right? You go up and you talk to this person and he or she seems to be a special needs, and they get on a piano and like, for fuck's sakes, how the hell did you know that? Right?
Right, right.
I, I think we try to put people in boxes because it's organized, and but we have to
And in a
reiterate
lot
to
of
our
cases, the
children,
educational system has been putting us in boxes.
right? That's what I'm
You
saying.
know,
We need to, parents, you're the last. You're the last line for your kids. You're the one that needs to educate them in things that maybe aren't, traditional. I don't know. Depends on what your kids like too. You're always going to learn something easier if you love it, right?
exactly. That's what I learned in Korea, that, kids were doing a really good job of learning English when it was because it was in a movie scene or in a popular song,
Right.
you know? If you relate it to things that they love, it's so much easier. And that goes for any subject. As long as you can relate it to things that they're actually into, you know, K-pop demon hunters or whatever, you can teach anything.
Okay. I'm old, and I had a friend that was the girl that worked for me that loved K-pop, right? So I looked it up because I don't even know what the hell it is.
Yeah.
Dude, my grandson will say, "Hey, have you heard of this guy?" And I'm like, I have no clue who that is. I mean, I don't listen to the radio or anything. There's no way to get that information unless you're searching it. And all the algorithms I have are educational or motivational or stuff like that, speaking. So I don't even know half the time what he's talking about. So he has to educate me and show me a video on this person, right? That I have no clue. And it's worse when someone passes away and I'm like, and they're like, oh, the world is mourning. I'm like, who is that? I don't even know who it is. Now,
Yeah.
Diane Keaton passed away this week, right? So most kids wouldn't even have a clue who she is, right? I remember her in just about every movie she's ever made. So,
Exactly.
well,
Yeah.
Chris,
Lady Hall.
this is awesome. I will send you all my media when after I don't edit anything, so you're gonna get what you get, and I'll do it that way. And I'll mention you. I really appreciate you being on. It was great meeting you. I hope we stay in touch. And don't get
Definitely.
off yet. I'm just gonna do a little outro, and then we'll chat for a minute. So,
It works.
it's the Ed Franklin No Limits podcast, Raising Eight, episode 10. Listen to this full thing. And of course you're going to be at the end, but I'll put this clip up front when I post it. Listen to the whole podcast. It's incumbent upon you parents to educate your kids. Do not count on other people like the school district. They do supply, kind of your basics, but it's really up to you for your kids to succeed and dream and survive and do all those things. You can always get a hold of me at edfranklin.nolimits@gmail.com or on any of my social media platforms. I have another good podcast coming up with a guest about AI, which kind of leans into what we're talking about here. But I appreciate you all listening. Make sure you subscribe and share my podcast when you get a chance, and I will talk to you all soon.